Okay, good morning.
Morning.
We're on 21a, the Mishnah, 6 lines from the top. So we're continuing to discuss laws applicable to a king. Lo yarber lo nashim. So the Torah says a king should not have too many wives. Ella shmonas, right? So what is too many? The Mishnah says 18. And the Gemara will discuss where we get that 18 from and some other views as well. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, mar behulo. He can have more wives than 18. As long as they don't turn his heart away from God. And we'll see why, because the continuation of the pasuk is lo yarba lo yunashim. He shouldn't have too many wives. V'lo yasur levavo, and or you might say so that his heart will not be turned away from God. Rabbi Shimon Omer, afilu achas u'mesiras libo harizol yisena. He's prohibited from marrying any wives if that wife will, he can't even have one wife if that proposed wife will turn him away from God. Imkain lama nemer lo yarba lo nashim. But doesn't the Torah say he shouldn't have too many wives? So where do you get this idea that you can't even have one wife if she's a bad wife? Dafilu kavigail, even. So that's talking about good wives, right? So you can't have any wives who will turn you away, a king, that is, and even if you have good wives, no more than 18. Okay, so we're going to unpack all of this in the Gemara.
What about Abigail?
Abigail is the exemplar of a good wife, a wife that is not going to turn him away. So, like, even if they're all good wives, the limit is 18. So Rabbi Shimon is saying that you can't have any bad wives, and you can have good wives. By you, I mean a king. And you can have good wives, but only up to 18. That's Rabbi Shimon's view.
No,
Okay?
he's not even one wife. If he's right.
No, if she's a bad wife, you can't have any wives. But if they're good wives, you can have 18 up to 18 good wives.
What? Even if he has one wife,
No,
if even one wife,
yeah.
if the one wife would turn him away, you can't even have one wife, right?
Right.
But
correct.
So then he wants to say there's no limit at all. Basically, he's not held by an 18.
No, that's Rabbi Shimon's view, is that you are limited by 18. So you can't marry any bad wives. You can marry good wives, but only a maximum of 18 good wives.
It seems that it's saying that he can't, even if he has one wife that would turn him away, he can't
Right.
marry that wife.
Correct.
That's Rabbi Shimon. So then he would have.
Right. But if she wouldn't turn your heart away, if she's what I'm calling a good wife, then you can marry her. Now, imkain lama nemar lo yarber lo nashim. So why does the Torah say you can't have too many wives? Because even good wives, you can only have 18 maximum. Okay?
But Rabbi Yehuda says he could have as many as he wants, basically. He's not limited by the 18.
As long as they're good wives,
Right.
correct. Yeah. Okay. Darish Tama Dekra, Rabbi Shimon lo Darish Tama Dekra. Gemara is proposing maybe this argument is really about whether we impute motives to the Torah's commandments, right? Reasons for the Torah's commandments. So if that's the case, so in other words, Rabbi Yehuda would say that we have a reason for this. So if the reason doesn't apply, in other words, they're all good wives, then there's no limit. Sorry, that would be yeah. And Rabbi Shimon would say, we don't pay attention. The Torah says don't have too many wives. Never mind the reason, even if the reason doesn't apply. Sorry, I got it backwards. Rabbi Yehuda would say that there's a reason for this. The Torah gives us a reason for this, and so if the reason doesn't apply, we can ignore it. Rabbi Shimon says no, even though the reason doesn't apply, like 20 good wives, you still can't do it. So, but we see the opposite views. Tanya, Almana ben Shiania ben Shiashira in Mashkininosa. So, you have a rule that if you lend someone money and you take a security for the money, and the person is poor and like you take his pajamas um, as security, and he's poor, he doesn't have any other pajamas, you have to give him back the pajamas at night so for him to use, and then you can collect them in the morning and keep them during the daytime. But a widow ain't mashkinio, so you can't take um, a security from the widow. Shenamar lo tachbal beged almana. You can't take the garment of a widow. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Shimon Omer Ashira mimashkinosa ani ainu mashkinosa. No, this only applies if the widow is poor, but if she's wealthy, it's not a problem. You can take it. V'atachai v'lachsila. You have to the for a poor widow, you have to give the garment back to her. V'yatamasia shemra b'shchenosea. If you would, oh no, the reason that you can't take from a poor woman is you have to be there every day, every night. You'd come by and drop off her pajamas. It doesn't look so good, right? It looks like she's a loose woman, um, and she'll get a bad reputation. So, Vermina my kamar, what are we saying? Hachikam is what he means. Mitoch shatam mashkana. If you would go ahead and take a mashkan, a security from this poor widow, then you'd have to give it back to her every night. And then she'll get a reputation for being a loose woman. So that only applies to a poor widow, right? But not a wealthy widow, right? So in other words, we make that difference because there's a reason for this rule, for the Torah's mitzvah, not to take a mashkon from a widow. So Rabbi Shimon is saying that only applies when the reason applies, right? That it wouldn't look for Alma. Rabbi Yehuda lo tarish tamid dekra, Rabbi Shimon darish tamid dekra. So we see that Rabbi Yehuda does not pay any attention to the reason for the mitzvah, and Rabbi Shimon does. So Gemara says, "Be Alma, Rabbi Yehuda lo darish tamid dekra." Really, Rabbi Yehuda would not say that you're darish tamid hamitzvahs, that you impute the reason to that you consider the reason for the mitzvah in deciding how it's applied. But in our case, in our Mishnah, to Befarish Tama Dekra, that the Torah says, you know why you shouldn't have too many wives, V'lo yasur levavo, so that your heart not be turned away, right? Matam le'arba l'nashim. What's the reason not to have too many wives? Mishum lo yasur levavo. So if the Torah explicitly tells you the reason of the mitzvah, it's not that you have to infer it, but the Torah explicitly tells you, then we pay attention. But if you have to infer it, then Rabbi Yehuda would say, no, we don't do that. We just follow the mitzvah. We don't presume to know exactly what all the reasoning is behind the mitzvah. Rabbi Shimon. So what about Rabbi Shimon? Like Rabbi Shimon, in the case of the widow, Rabbi Shimon says it's only poor widow, so we are darish tam dekra. And in the case of the king, he does not say that. Why? Let's see. Bialma dushin tam dekra. Okay, I say that generally we do infer the reasons of the mitzvah. So why does the Torah spell it out for you? Right? The Torah could just say, don't have too many wives, and I would figure out, why? Because that would turn his heart away. So why does the Torah have to say explicitly "Lo yasser levavo"? I would know that anyway. I would know why not have too many wives? Mishum lo yasser lovely. Why does the Torah have to say it explicitly? To tell you, I feel to tell you that it's not just the question of too many wives. That even as Rav Shimon said in the Mishnah, even if there's one wife and that would be turn his heart away, then you can't marry her. Elamani Mekayim Lo Yarba. So in that case, why does it say don't have too many? Just say don't have wives who will turn you away. Why does it say don't have too many? Dafilu Kavigail. That puts a limit. Even if they're good wives, even if they're wives like Abigail, there's still a maximum of 18. My question is, does having more than 18 good wives, is that in itself going to lead the king astray? That's what it sounds like. Like maybe so, right? Maybe the power or the luxury of it or something goes to his head. I don't know, but it's not clear.
So here he is, Darish Takra, right? 1 second.
No, he's always Darish Tam Dekra. The question is, why does the Torah have to tell you here, right? To tell you that even that although the reason is not to turn away. So I would think, right, that if they're all good wives, you could have 50 good wives.
Right.
They're not going to turn you away. No, so the Torah says, still lo yarba lo nashim. Even if they're good wives, you still can't have more than 18.
So in this case, we say he's not Darish the crowd, or are we saying?
Yeah, he is. Yes, he would have been. Here, it's not necessary to be Darish Tanakh because the Torah tells you explicitly, right?
Uh-huh.
But the question is, why does the Torah have to tell you explicitly? You would have said that anyway because you're Darish Tam Dekra. So the answer is to tell you that even if that it applies, even if it's just one, that there's two factors here: too many wives, and make sure you have a good wife. There's two separate factors.
So he doesn't.
That's what it's telling us. So
So
yes, he agrees that Dorish Tam Dekra, and and here the Torah tells you the reason for a particular reason for because of a particular situation, that there's two things going on here: number of wives and making sure that they're good wives.
so he doesn't have to be Darish the crowd here because it's explicit.
Okay, yeah, you could say that. Now, Hanishmon Esrei Nolan. So the Torah doesn't give a number. The Torah says don't have too many wives. Where do you get the number 18 from? Tichsiv, Vayvoldu David Bani Bechevra. Because the Navi says that in listing David's family, well, David was first king in Hebron for what, 6 years, I think,
Two and a
and then
half. Didn't we say 2.5? Or no? Or
in
7 years? 7 years.
7 years. Okay, 7 years.
The 2.5 was that was the issue with Avner and
Right. That he delayed
he delayed the
his
kingship. He
yeah,
delayed his kingship.
right.
And Yoav, who was the king then?
Ishbosheth.
Achitophel? Was it no?
Ishbosheth.
Ishbosheth.
Yeah.
Right. So he was 7 years. Was it 6 or 7?
Well,
He was in
I forget.
Hebron.
Okay, but whatever. But while he was in Hebron, the Navi says, "Vayivol David b'nim b'Chevron." He had sons in Hebron, and lists them. Vayi b'charo, his firstborn, Amnon, lachinoam ha'Yisraelis. Amnon was born to his wife Achinoam. Umishneu, the second one, Kilav l'Avigail, Eshes Naval Carmeli. The second one was Kilav, born to Abigail. Ashlishi Avshalom ben Macha. The third one was Avshalom, born to Macha. Um, and Harvi, the fourth one, Adonia ben Chagit. That's his fourth wife, Chagit. Chamishi, Shefatia ben Avital. The fifth one was Shfatia, son of Avital. Bashishi, Yisraam Egla Eshes David. And the sixth one was Yisraam to Egla, David's wife. Eile Yuldu David b'Chevron. So these six were born to David in Hebron. V'karmalei Navi, ima'at v'osifu l'cha kahena v'chahena. Now, when Nasan Hanavi, criticizes David, he says that God says to him, what, you don't have enough power, enough wives. You're not, things are not satisfactory for you. If you don't have enough wives, I'll give you kahena v'chahena. I'll give you, like these and like these. Like I'll give you more and more. So kahena shis v'chahena shis. In other words, I'll give you another six and another six. What's 3 times 6? 18. David le tam Nisrei. Now, so Ravina asks, Ema
Why did he
kahena,
get 18? He says, "V'cheina, v'cheina." That's 6 and 6, right?
right? Yeah. So he
That's
had
12.
six. No, he already had
Oh,
six.
okay.
If it's not
Okay.
enough, I'll give you kahena v'chahena. I'll give you
Oh, all
another
right.
six and
Okay.
another six. That's 18. Maskif la Ravina. So Ravina asks, Ema kahena tartes, right? Maybe it means I'll give you kahena. I'll give you another six. That would make 12. V'chahena and another portion would be another 12. Why don't you say it's another 12? So the kahena esrin varba. Maybe it should be 24. Is the limit? Tanya Namayachim, we have another support for this. Lo Yarba Lo Nashim, Yoser Meyasrim Yarba. There's a brisa that says 24 is the max for the king. And also Laman Darish Vav, and also if you want to say Kahena v'Chahena, right, that the Vav includes something else as well, then Arbi Mishmona Havu, then multiply it again by 2, and you get 48. At Tanya Namayachim, we have such a view. Lo yarba lo nashim yosem yarbaim v'shmona. There's a brisa that takes that view that you can't have more than 48 wives. V'tani done my tame. So why would you say 18? Like why do you reject this interpretation of kahena? Or of kana makish kahena basra kahena kama? the kahenas are referring to the original amount, not doubling whatever you have so far. So ma kahena kama shis, av kahena basra shis. Just as the first kahena refers to six because you already had six kids, so the second kahena is also six. Okay, so fine. It's just a matter of interpretation. You could interpret it as 18, 24, or 48. Our Mishnah, and I think that's the normative view, is 18. No, but the more questions. Wait a minute. You said there were six. He had six wives. Michal. What about Michal? Michal Bas Shaul was another wife of David's, right? So doesn't that make seven? So, um, so first of all, the Gemara says Amarav Egla zu Michal. It's just another name for Egla. Egla, the sixth wife, is actually Michal. It's the same person. So he really only had six. V'lamani question Egla. Why was she also called Egla? Shechaviva alav Egla. She was. It's like a pet name, you might say. He loved her like a calf. Meaning, Lule Charashtem Beglasi. Shimshon says, as a metaphor, if you had not plowed with my calf, meaning if you had not, pumped Delilah for information, you wouldn't have figured out my riddle. And he refers, this metaphor is you plowed with my calf. He's referring to, the metaphor refers to his wife. So we see even Eglah is a term used for a wife. Umihavu umichal b'nei. But wait a
Oh,
minute.
that was right. So Rashi says that too, right? Shimshon Karela Ishto Shehigida them Chidato. Oh, she told.
Yeah, remember he asked them a riddle, and they figured out the riddle, but they only figured out the riddle because they pumped his wife for information.
Right.
So he's like, "You're cheating." Right, and he refers, and the metaphor he uses is, "Had you not plowed in my field with my calf, meaning my wife, we wouldn't have figured out my riddle." Now Gemara's another question. Wait a minute. You want to say that the sixth wife is Michal, also known as Eglah, and that was the mother of his sixth son, but Michal didn't have children. Michal bas Shaul lo haya lo vlad ad yomosa. There was an incident where she made fun or she criticized David when he was dancing too wildly for her taste at the inauguration or when the ark was brought back to Israel. Um, and it says, as she didn't have any until her dying day, she had no children. So how can you say that she is the one who's referred to as the mother of this last child? Amar Chisda, Ad Yom Mosa Lahayala. It means she didn't have any children until her dying day. But Biyom Mosa Hayala, on her dying day, so like she died in childbirth, right? On her dying day, that's when she had a child. So that answers how she could have had a child. So Mirtei, the Gemara says, wait a minute. Banim hecha kachashivlu. When are we counting these children? Bechevron, in Hebron. Vilumasa de Michal b'Yerushalayim hava. But the thing about the incident with Michal, in which she was cursed not to have children, that was in Yerushalayim. Dichsiv, umicha bashol nishkva balachalam, teres hamelch David mefazes umecharkel l'fnei Hashem vativas. That incident is described in this pasuk. She looked out the window, she saw David dancing wildly, and she despised him. V'amar Rav Yehuda v'Tamar Rav Yosef shekalta Michal limitarpasa. That Michal, was punished by becoming infertile. So. So you want to say that, oh, she had the child she had was on her dying day. She died in childbirth, but that doesn't make sense because if you're saying that she had become infertile, then how can she have had a child, right? So you can't answer me that she had a child. She didn't have any children until her dying day, but on her dying day she had a child. No, we're told that she was infertile. So how could she have had a child? Where it says, ad osamasa hayala. Before that incident, she had a child, right? And Yisram was born in Hebron. Later on in Yerushalayim, when this happened, and she was cursed with becoming infertile for the future, but she already had a child, so that answers the question. After that incident, she had no more children. Okay. Vaksiv. So now we're going back to the idea of a maximum number of wives, 18 wives. Vaksiv, Vayikach David od pilagshim v'nashim Yerushalayim. It says that David took more wives, which sounds like um, so before Nasan Hanavi gave him this kahena v'chahena offer, like you have, double and triple number of wives that you have, he had already had more than six wives, right? Because the Navi tells us that besides these six, he had more wives and concubines, right? So the kahena wasn't only referring to six, he already had, let's say, for make up a number, he already had nine wives, right? So then the kahena v'kahena would be 27. Well, why do you get 18? Um, so the answer is Lemaluye Shmonasar. Yeah, those were the extra wives um, that Nasan and Navi promised him. In other words, we're not we're not necessarily restricted in saying that those wives were before the prophecy of Nasan, right? He had the six wives. Then Nasan said you could have more wives, and then he had more wives. So that's there's no indication that there were more wives, more than six at the time that Nasan Navi gave him this kahena v'chahena uh, offer.
Well, we learned at the beginning that he's entitled to have 18, so why should there be a problem?
Yeah, that's fine. Then there's no problem, right? The problem would be like the problem we're proposing is okay, he has six wives, and then the pasuk says he had more wives. So let's say, for just sake of argument, let's say then he had nine, and then Nasan Navi tells him kahena v'kahena, right? So then the kahena is not referring to six anymore. The kahena is how many wives you have now? I have nine. Okay, you can have nine more and nine more,
Uh-huh.
right? So the Gemara answer is no. At the time of the prophecy, he still had only six. Nasan said you could have six more, and then he went and had more wives, as Nasan had assured him.
But what's the sense when Rashi says Alma Tova Habole Nashim? Does that
Tuva,
mean
tuva means
Tuva?
more.
More.
Tuva means
Okay, I
more.
was
Yeah,
thinking good.
yeah, no.
Here it means more. Okay.
Okay. Now my nashim and my pilagshim. So we just saw that he had more wives and concubines. What's the difference? Amar Rav Amarav. Nashim b'ksuva b'kiddushin. Wives get a ksuba and they get kiddushin. Pilagshim below ksuva below kiddushin. Concubine is a partner that you take with no ksuba and no kiddushin. Okay. Amar Rav Amarav.
Interesting. Rashi and Chumash with Avram and the story of Avram, he doesn't say kedushin there. He says when Avram took Keturah and Pilagshim,
Mm-hmm.
there he says that what's the Pilagish? He says it's below Ketuba. He doesn't mention kedushim.
Mm, okay. Um, okay, you could say it's lavdafka, or you could make a drasha from it. Go ahead. I invite you to do so. Um, Amr ibn Marav, Arba Me'as Yeladim Hayelo David. David had 400 children. V'chulam b'nei Yifas Toar hayu. They were all sons of Eshes Yifas Toar, captive women. Right? You capture a woman in war, you can take her as a wife. And all these 400 were from captive women. Megadle Blorios hayu, and they had long. This Blorios is a kind of a hairstyle that was some kind of pagan custom. Okay, some kind of a rat tail that was a pagan custom. V'kulan Yoshvim Mikronos Shalzav, and they all rode in golden carriages. U'mahalchim b'rashi gayasos, and they rode at the head of the troops. V'hem hayu bale agrofin shel beis David. They were the strongmen of the house of David. So, um, what does it have to do with anything? So we're now going off on a tangent. If you ever review the Marav,
You say this
Tamar.
about all his children? Well, with Shlomo, she came from Bathsheba, right? Was Bathsheba considered Yifat Torah?
Right, so clearly it means 400 other ones. Like he had 400 children besides the children that we have the genealogy of, or that we know were from within from within Israel. He had 400 children who were also additional children um, who were these sons of captive women.
So then it
Uh,
seems clearly he had more than 18 wives, right? Or no?
Um, that could well be actually, yeah, unless you don't count them as wives, but you should, right? You should count them. Um, let's see, what's 400 divided by 18? It's like over 20. Yeah, that seems a little maybe he went over the limit, or maybe he held by the brisa that said you could have 48 wives.
Yeah, okay.
All right. I'm reading Marav. Tamar Basifas Torah Haisa. His daughter Tamar. You remember the incident of his he had a daughter Tamar who was raped by her half brother Amnon. Um, so she was one of these children of a captive. Shenemar v'ato daber melech ki lo yimna'eni mimeka. Because when Tamar tries to convince Amnon um, not to take advantage of her. She says, like, speak to the king, and he won't prevent you from marrying me. Now, if that's the case, if they could get married, like they're half siblings, they wouldn't be allowed to get married. She was the daughter of an Eshes Yifas Toar. So, um, so it's a little surprising. Like you'd think that when you marry an Ashes Yifas Toar, doesn't she become part of your family? But um, maybe maybe Tamar was born before her mother was married to David. That's one way that you could understand this passage. Like since we weren't Jewish yet, or the mother wasn't Jewish yet, or wasn't married when I was born, so technically we're half siblings, but halachically we're not. So that's how it could
Mother
be permitted.
wasn't Jewish.
Hmm.
You saying the
Sorry?
mother wasn't Jewish. So
Yeah,
that
the mother we're saying was a Yefas Tar, was a captive in war.
so when did he marry her? Or when did he take her? Well, whatever. I mean, when did David
Yeah, when was she conceived? Um, Before they were married. Like if you take a Yefas Tar, you have to marry her, right?
right?
But you could have conceived, the child could have been conceived before the marriage, and she would still have been considered not Jewish. And so the halachic relationship is of a different, is not of to Amnon would not be there. If she had been born after the marriage, and presumably the mother would have been considered Jewish, then they would have been half siblings. But since she was conceived before the marriage, they're considered not related. Okay, it's a
Rashi
little
says
little puzzling.
Adayin lo nitgaira imo
Hmm.
yelidata, that
Yeah,
she hadn't yet converted.
right,
Her mother hadn't yet converted when she was born.
right,
So she was born before her mother converted.
right. And then once she converted, or no, since they were born before we were, they have no family relationship, halachically, that is.
Right. So she was born, she was a Gentile before her mother converted. So she
Right,
was already born.
right.
So
Um,
she was David's child, but the mother
Not
was not yet
related
the
to
mother
the
was not
brother.
yet Jewish.
Not related to the brother, because the brother was born to a Jewish mother. Tamar was born to a non-Jewish mother, and then converted. So she's like a new person, right? Gerish and Yisgayer katan hanoah dame.
Well, how is David allowed to marry? Isn't she supposed to? How is he allowed to marry or a non-Jew, or maybe he didn't even marry her?
But that's the law of Yefas Tar,
You have to
right?
keep
That
her
a
in the
captive
house.
in war, you capture someone in war, you can marry her, but you have to give her all the privileges of a wife. So in other words, she becomes fully Jewish and fully your wife.
Oh, but Tamar was already born.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Now going down the path of the story of Tamar and Amnon. Well, Amnon Rea Ushmoyadav ben Shima Achi David. Um, Amnon had a friend named Yonadav, who was a nephew of David. Yonadav Ish Chacham, he was wise, and he gave him this advice to how to seduce Tamar. I'm reviewing the Rav Ish Chacham Larisha. He was wise. You know how he was wise? He was wise in how to be a Rasha, right? Like it was his he was the inspiration for this whole thing, which was clearly bad. Vayomer, Madua takachal dal ben Amelach. So he said to Amnon, why are you so, why are you looking so poorly? Vayomer lo, Yonadav, shechaval mishkavcha v'hischal, vias li'enai es habiria. So he gave him this idea, like, fake illness, and say that you want Tamar, your sister, your half sister, to look after you, and that way um, you'll come to be alone with her. She'll bring you your food. Vatikach es ha-masres vatitzok lefanov. So it worked out. Tamar took baked some cookies and brought them to Amnon. Amar v'im arav she'asol minei tigun. She, not cookies, but fried food. She made some latkes. Amnon sina gadolama. Now, after the rape, Amnon suddenly he hates her more than he loved her in the first place. My tama, Amar Yitzchak, Nima nikshuralo vasa asu krus shafcha. She took a pubic hair and tied it around his organ and damaged it so that he was considered a krus shafcha, someone who doesn't have a male organ. So the Gemara says, if that happened, like, what are we blaming her for? Like, why is he blaming her? Why does he hate her? If this happened, Ella ema that she did it deliberately, and that's why he hated her. Aini, so is this possible? Ha darash Rabba, my vayetze lach shem bagayim biyafyech. The Navi Yecheskel says you're going to get a reputation among the nations of the world for your beauty. He interprets this that Jewish women did not have hair under their armpits or in their pubic area. So what pubic hair are we talking about? So Gemara says, Shani Tamar Devasi Fastar Havai. She wasn't Jewish. She wasn't born Jewish. She was born as a non-Jew. So there's no reason to think that she came under this category of Jewish women who purportedly don't have hair.
Is that a Devar Yedua?
I had never heard this
Where's the
before.
Gemara come up with that?
I never came across this before. I don't remember it from last time learning Sanhedrin either, to be honest with you. Um, yeah, I mean, it's yeah, one wonders what they're talking about. I mean,
And when we talk about when we're
anyone
talking
anyone
about
who was
Bulgaria,
married,
when we're
anyone who was
talking,
married would not have said such a thing about contemporary women. So we're looking back and interpreting, women in the time of Yecheskel. I don't know what to tell you. It's a very odd drush.
but don't we define a Bulgaria, Nara Bulgaria,
Yeah,
a girl
so
with
that
two
you could say
hairs?
Bisman Hazeh, that this is like I said, anybody who
Not even
had
Bisman Azad. The Gemara you have to have Shtei Sarot, right?
yeah, in the time of the Gemara, I'm saying. So the Gemara is looking back to the time of Yecheskel. So obviously nobody, who let's say was married or who had any sexual experience with a woman would have said that there's no hair, right? And even the hair under the arm, you don't actually have to sleep with someone to have, to see that. So clearly it's retrospective. It's like, okay, like now you have all these things about Bogeres and everybody has hair and so on, but looking back to Yecheskel, this is what Yecheskel meant at the time, whatever. But it's still very strange. Um, okay, so continuing with the story, Vatikach Tamar Efer al Rosha Ukusonos Hapasim Asher Alea Kara. She put ashes on her head and she tore her royal coat. Tana Mishmeid Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, Gadol Gadra Tamar Ba'osasha. she like put up a fence, as it were, to prevent this from ever happening again. Amru, because people said, "Livnos malachim kach." If like the daughter of a king can suffer like this, can be violated like this, Livnos said Yosa salachas kama v'kama, then certainly it could happen to anybody. In Litznuas kach, and somebody who was modest like Tamar, she was wearing her coat after all. The fruits of salachas kama v'kama. But it could happen to certainly could happen to someone who's less modest. So, in other words, by publicizing what happened to her, she raised awareness of, women have to be careful. Amar Yudam Arav, Biosa Shah Gavru at that time, they made a decree, Yichud v'ala pnuya, that you can't have yichud, you can't be in seclusion with a married woman, and v'ala pnuya, and that you can't sleep with an unmarried woman, because technically from the Torah, there's no prohibition against sleeping two consenting adults sleeping together if neither one is married to somebody else, or if the woman isn't married to somebody else. But they instituted this rule that no sleeping with unmarried women. So Yichud Daraisa, wait a minute. Yichud is from the Torah. Shimon ben Yotzadok. Remez Yichud min Torah minayin. Where do we have a hint against Yichud from the Torah? Shenemar ki yisischa achicha ben imecha. If your brother, who is your brother through your mother, um, you know, instigates you, incites you to avodah zarah. V'chibein aim mesis bein av ena mesis. Why does it say ben imecha, your brother, son of your mother? Right? What about son of your brother through your father? Right? That could happen too. Elalomar lach. So why does the Torah specify ben imecha? Ben hamisyached im imo vein acher misyached im kol arayos shebetorah. Telling you that it's a son can be in yichud with his mother, but nobody else can. So like since um, so this is an indication um, that this is an exception to the rule of yichud. So if that's true, it's a Torah law. Alema gozral yichud d'pnuya. So we're going to reread the Gzera, not that Yichud was established then. No, Yichud was indeed established by the Torah, but Yichud with a single woman, that's what the Gzera was. Vadonia ben Chagis misnase lemor ani melech. Going back to an unrelated story to Tamar, Adonia, he promoted himself as king. Amar Vidim Arav, Lamed Shabikesh Laholmo V'lo Holamto. He tried to crown himself, but the crown didn't fit on his head. Um, um, Interesting Rashi here. The second Rashi at the top. Sheteshe barosha keser malchus v'lo holamto lefi shahaya sharvit shel zav batoch chalola midofin ledofin. It had a bar across the middle inside the crown. Ve'ena misyashavas barosho el lemishi yesh lo charitz barosho. The David had some kind of a genetic feature of his skull, that there was like a crease in his skull, and this bar was fitted to that crease, and presumably any of his children. V'injan Barosho shel El Lamishi Yesh Lacharitz Barosho V'hu Edus Leveis David Shekal Roy Lamalchus Holamto. This was turned into a qualification. Like if you had this genetic quality of David HaMelech, then you were eligible for inheriting the throne. He made himself a chariot and runners and 50 runners before him. My Ravusa, like so what? Like that would be a normal thing for a prince to do, is to have his own retinue. They were all these were special runners. They had their spleens removed, and they had their something done to the soles of their feet so that they could run barefoot. This isn't something that just any prince would do. This would only a king would have, this level of I don't know if devotion is the right word, or this level of specialness of his retinue. So that's what made this a bid for the kingship. Okay, next Mishnah. Lo
They could run
Yarbalos.
on it. Rashi says the bottoms removed from their feet, whatever they could run on the thorns.
Yeah,
And on the
yeah, they could run barefoot without
and there ain't no
being injured.
ain't right, ain't no nizukin out of barkanin. I don't know what that is.
Um, Kotivil Barkanin. Maybe pebbles or something. I'm not sure.
I don't know the
Whatever, they could run barefoot
right.
without being injured or without being deterred. Next Mishnah, Lo Yarber Lo Susim. King can't have too many horses. Ela Kadei Merkavto. Only when he needs for his chariots or for the army, basically. V'kasef Azav Lo Yarber Lo Mod. Can't have too much gold and silver. Ela Kadei Lieutenant Bagna. He just needs enough to pay the salaries of the soldiers. Because of Sefer Torah Lishmo, he has to write a personal Sefer Torah. Yotzil Milchama Motzia Imo. He takes it with him everywhere. Goes out to war, he takes it with him. Nifnasum Machnisa Imo. When he comes back, he brings it back. Yoshe Badin Imo. If he sits in judgment, he has it with him. Mesev Ukenegdo. If he sits down to eat, he has to keep it with him. Shenemar V'Haisa Imo V'Karbo Kol Yemei Chayav. Because about this Torah that he has to write, it says it should be with him, and he should read it all the days of his life. Tana Rabbanan, rabbis taught, Lo Yarba Lo Susim, shouldn't have too many horses. Yachal Afilu Kedem Kavto Parasha. Maybe it means you shouldn't even have so many horses as to equip your army. Talmud Lomar Lo. No, Lo Yarba Lo Susim. You shouldn't have horses for himself. Lo Eno Marba, Avol Marbu Kedei Richlo Parasha. You shouldn't have too many for his own stables, but for the army, you could have as many as you need. Hamani Mekayim Susim. So why does it say horses? Susim. Um, Um, so what is the prohibition against horses? Susim horses that are just to hang around. In other words, they're not army horses. They're horses in the king's stable and whatever. He just keeps them for his own enjoyment or aggrandizement. How do you know that even one extra horse for the king is not that's not for a purpose is too many? Talmud Lomar Laman Harbos Sus. As later the Torah says, you shouldn't go back to Mitzrayim in order um, to multiply to have many horse. Okay, it uses the singular for horse, so even one horse can violate this prohibition. So then why does it use in the original phrase, why does it use the plural for horses? Right? If one horse too many is too many, what do you have to say? The horse says plural. Lav or below say al kol sus v'sus, to tell you that each extra horse is a separate lav. So Tama the cost of Rahmana lo. So wait a minute. You said the whole thing is based on because it says lo yar below susim. You shouldn't have horses for himself. Halav hache. But if it hadn't written that, havamina filu kadei richbo for of namilo, then I would have thought that not even for the army. Um, so what's the question here? I guess the question is like, how does this make any sense? Like, what kind of self-respecting country is not going to be able to equip its army? Where it says "L'tzricha la poshe," we're talking about not war. Obviously, you'd be able to have, regardless of what the Torah instructs, it means that you can have horses for battle. But what it's also telling you is that if you need supply horses as well, then you can have those. You can have those too. That's what it tells you by Le'ar below Susim. That you certainly the Torah wants you to have army horses, and it doesn't. And when it says you, the king, can't have too many horses for yourself, it means that you could have as many as you need, not only army battle horses but also supply horses. Okay, because of Zav Le'ar below. Now we're turning to you can't have too much money, too much gold and silver. El Kadeli in España, only enough to pay the wages of the army. Tanarabanan, you might think it's telling you not you can't have so much money even to pay the wages. Tom Lomar low. It says no, you can't have for yourself. Lo yarba low, you can't have too much for yourself. Lo yarba marbu kedeli ten Espana, as we said. Tama the Costa Rachman Alo. The Gemara says, okay, so it's because it says you can't have too much for yourself. If not that, what would I have said that you can't pay your army? Of course, you know the Torah can't possibly mean that. Um, it's like what it's telling you is by that you're allowed to have, a reserve set aside in the national account. And it's only personal wealth for the king that he can't have too much of. But the country, the Ministry of Defense can have a surplus, can have a reserve fund, and that is what it's telling you. By like only the king's personal account can't have too much money. So Hasha the Amros lo with Russia. Now that you're saying that the word lo, that it's only for you, the king, that you can't that you have to be careful of these prohibitions. So lo yarba lo nashim madrashosle. So how do you interpret the word lo when you said you can't have too many wives for yourself? Well, who else are you going to have wives for, right? Well, money I can understand. You have money for the army. Horses I can understand. You need horses for the army, but like, what are these extra wives that you can't have, but who else can have them? So my answer is lamute had yotos. That tells you that this only applies to kings and um, not to ordinary people. Because like the reason you can't have too many wives is what the Torah says, so that you shouldn't turn away from God. So maybe this would apply to anybody. So that's why it says lo yaber lo nashim. No, this even though the reason is not to turn your heart away, and anybody could have their heart turned away by too many wives or the wrong wife, then nonetheless the mitzvah is only for the king. Lo yaber lo nashim.
So there's no
Rabbeinu
limit
Ram,
for anybody else then.
no limit for anybody else. Correct. Rabbi Yehuda Rami, Rabbi Yehuda asks, "Ksiv vayil Shlomo arbaim elef uros susim lemerkavto." Shlomo Hamelech had 40,000 rows of stalls of horses for his chariots. Ksiv vayil Shlomo arbas alafim uros susim. And then somewhere else it says he had 4,000. So which is it, 40,000 or 4,000? Okay, it said Yimar arbaim elef itztablos hayu kolach v'yechad hayu bo arba alafim urvos. If there were 40,000 stables, each of the stables had 4,000 rows of stalls of horses. Or if there were 4,000 stables, each one had 40,000 rows. So it's what he really had was 4,000 times 40,000, whichever way you slice it. Rabbi Yitzchak Rame, Ksiv, Ein Kesef Nechshav Yimei Shlomo Lemuma. Silver in the days of Shlomo Melech was like worthless. Like the country was so wealthy that even silver had no value. It was so plentiful. You couldn't buy anything with silver because everybody had silver. Uksiv. It also says, "Vayitain Hamelach Asakesef B'Yerushalayim Ka'avanim." Elsewhere, it says that silver was as worthless as stones, but stones have a value, right? So there's something.
You have a
So
pruta.
were they
Rashi says
completely
a
worthless, or were they worth as much as regular stones? Lokasha Gemara is not a problem. Kan Kodem Shenasa Shlomos Basparo, Kan Lachar Shenasa Shlomos Basparo. There were different periods, right, before he consolidated his rule and made all these alliances and allied with Egypt by marrying the daughter of Paro. That's when the really wealthy period began. So until then, they were wealthy, but silver still had some value. Once he married the daughter of Paro, the country became so wealthy that silver was completely worthless. Arav Yitzchak, B'shasha Nasa Shlomo was Bas Paro, when he married the daughter of Paro. Yared Gabriel v'noatz kana bayam. Gabriel, the angel, came down and put a reed in the sea, v'hel sirton, and it gathered sand around it. V'yalav nivna krach gadol shabarami, and that was the origin of the city of Rome. Um, in other words, the country of Italy grew from this reed that was planted at the time Shlomo married the daughter of Paro. It's rather fanciful. Um, um, V'yamar of Yitzchak, B'nei Ma'alon Yisgalu Tamei Torah. Why, coming full circle to the idea of Tamei HaMitzvos, of why Why doesn't the Torah tell us the reasons for the mitzvos? Because we have two mitzvos that the reason is given. And Nichsha behen gadol ha'olam. And Shlomo Melech, who is the wisest of all men, he messed up, right? He thought, oh, I understand the reason, so it's fine if I ignore the prohibition because I'll be careful of the reason. And guess what? He married too many wives and his heart turned away from God. And what was the second one? Too many wives and too many horses. Um, so yeah, so that teaches you that it's better not to have uh, to know the reason for a mitzvah, so that even if you think you know the reason, you still have to do the mitzvah. You can't exempt yourself. And what were those two? Oh yeah, ksiv lo yarba lo nashim. Don't have too many wives. Amar Shlomo ani arba v'lo asur. I'll have many wives. It's okay. I know what I'm doing. I'll be careful not to have my heart turned away from God. Uksiv vayi leizikna Shlomo nashav zikna Shlomo nashav hituas levavo. And the Navi says, guess what? His wives turned his heart away from God. And the second, ksiv lo yarba lo susim. Don't have too many horses. V'amar Shlomo ani arba v'lo ashiv. I'm going to have too many horses. I'm not worried that I'm going to go back to Egypt. I'll just keep that in mind. Uksiv vatetse merkava mimitzrayim b'sheish. And he ended up going to Egypt and marrying the daughter of Paro, and clearly, he was tripped up by ignoring this mitzvah. Now, because of Sefer Torah Lishmo, we saw that the king writes the Sefer Torah. Tana, we have a brayso. Um, you can't use the king can't use a nice Sefer Torah that his father or ancestors left him. He has to write his own new Torah. Amar Rava, Alpha Pishenichol Avos of Sefer Torah. Any person, even though you have inherited the Sefer Torah, mitzvah lichnov mishalo, you still have a mitzvah to write your own. Shenemar v'ata kisu lachem sashir azos. The last mitzvah in the Torah, write this shira, which is interpreted as the Torah, for yourself. So everybody has a mitzvah. So Abaye asked, for Kosiv lo Sefer Torah lishmo, shlo yisna b'shel acherim melech in hedyot lo. Doesn't the fact that the Torah says that, or that we're understanding that the Torah is telling the king that you have to write your own Sefer Torah, even if you inherited one, doesn't that imply that only you, the king, have to do that, and everybody else they can be satisfied with a Torah that they inherited? Um, well, Tzricha Torahs, no, because the king had to have two Torahs, right? One Torah like everybody else, and one Torah that the king had to have, especially because he was the king, and that's what it's telling you about. Even that one, you have to write your own. You, the king, have to write your own. But and the same goes for the Torah. The Torah you have to have because you're like everybody else has to have a Torah that also everybody has to write their own. Tanya, and this is in accordance with a brisa. V'chasalos mishneh Torah. So he has to write the second Torah. Kosev l'shmo shtei Torahs. You have to have two. Achas she Yosef nichnas imo, one that he takes around with him wherever he goes. V'achas shu menachas lo b'veis kanazah, one he keeps in his vault. Also she Yosef nichnas imo, the one that he carries around with him. Also sakamin kamea v'tol b'zroa, you hang it from your arm. Basically, you put a strap on it and carry it around with you. Shenamar shivisi Hashem nagdi tamid, as it says, kimimini balamot. I'll see you, God, before me always. You will not depart from my right side. So, meaning it has to be on your arm. But you don't take it into the bathroom with you. Shenamar because it says it should be with you and you should read from it all the days of your life. Makom aroyli crossbow. Only take it with you where you could read it, but you can't read the Sefer Torah in the bathroom. Therefore, you don't have to take it with you into the bathroom. So this is very interesting. I always wondered about this, how this occurred. The Torah was originally written in Paleo Hebrew, right? In a script, you may have seen, artifacts from ancient times in which Hebrew has a different alphabet. So that's called Ksav Ivri, Ulashon Kodesh, and in Hebrew. Chazra v'nidam b'mei Ezra, in the days of Ezra, it was re-given to the people, B'ksav Ashuri Sulashon Arami, in modern Hebrew script, and in Aramaic. in like Aramaic, written in, this is astonishing, right? That the Torah was written in Hebrew letters, but in Aramaic. Um, Beru lehen Yisrael ksav Ashuris l'shon hakodesh, and the people chose to continue with Ksav Ashuris with the modern Hebrew script and Hebrew. V'inichu had Yotos Ksav Ivris Lashon Arami, and they left for the common people the Paleo Hebrew and Aramaic language. Man had Yotos, who are the common people. Amar Chizda Kusai, these are the Kutim. My Ksav Ivris, Amar Chizda Ksav Libona, whatever that means. It's like I said, Paleo Hebrew. And we will stop here for today.
It says Rashi says Otiot Gedolot. Otiot Gedolot. That's the Levinaa.
Yeah, it's unclear if Rashi was familiar um, with uh, with Paleo Hebrew. I don't know.
Shekotvin
Yeah, I see what Rashi says.
Bekamiot Umezozot. That's
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, it's I don't know what Rashi means. Um,
large letters, and that but put it that you write for the in mezuzah, but mezuzah the letters aren't so large, are they? I don't know.
yeah, I don't know what Rashi means. Um, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Tell me, how did the king carry? It said earlier that the king would carry the Sefer Torah with him when he went to battle. How is he manipulating a gun and a Sefer Torah on the other side? How does
good question. Maybe it was very small Torah, or maybe he didn't. Maybe. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess he carried a sword. Yeah, well, you'd think it would have kind of hampered him. Yeah, maybe Kamin Kamea means a very small script you could wear around your neck is what I how I envisioned it. But the Gemara refers to Mimini, my right hand. I don't know. Good question. Not easy being king. Okay. Have a good day, everybody.